Hey Guitar Champion, what's going on? You're here back from my practice cave, and welcome to today's lesson where I'm going to show you 5 of my favorite tricks how you can spice up your solos. Here we go. There are a ton of ways and parameters how you can create, build, form and also destroy your solo. And I want to speak a little bit about 5 of those ways how I like to spice up my solos in the style of Guthrie Govan, Marty Friedman, John Petrucci, all players like that really inspired me. I will demonstrate those 5 tips on my solo from the song Arcturus Prime of my new band Eternity's End. You aren't familiar with Eternity's End? Well, let me ask you this. Are you a fan of 2-guitar shredding like on Cacophony or Racer X? Or a fan of power metal like Blind Guardian, Halloween or Angra? Then Eternity's End is definitely the right thing for you. It's the over-the-top epic shred power metal band that I'm in, together with technical death metal legend Christian Münzner and Hannes Grossmann and Linus Klausenitzer. All those guys are legends. And yeah, I'm going to demonstrate those 5 tips with this solo. So first, let us check out the solo. Here we go. Okay, now the solo itself is down-tuned 1 step, and we are here in the key of B flat. But to make everything a little bit more simple, I have here my trustworthy Ibanez headless guitar in standard tuning, and we are doing this in A, because it's a little bit easier to explain some harmonic kind of ideas that I've put into the solo. Okay, now let's dive right into tip number 1, and tip number 1 is know your chord tones. Well, because what most people kind of underestimate is the power of chord tones, the melody that we have inside of a chord progression. And yes, you have most of the time some certain melody inside of a chord progression. So first let us check out the chord progression that we have here inside of Arcturus Prime. Alright, and the chord progression is a pretty common chord progression. We have A, then going to F, G, and then A again. So A is definitely our root note. This is our home base where we want to go to, where it really leads us to. It really feels like a root, like the 1 of the chord progression. And now here the interesting thing about this chord progression is that we are only playing power chords. Power chords are chords which are built up out of the root and the 5th of a chord. But which interval was important again to make it major or minor? Well, the 3rd. And we don't have the 3rd inside of a power chord, which gives me a lot of freedom. Oh, so much cool freedom. Well, the basic or common way would to see this as in the scale of A minor, because all 3 power chords fit into the scale of A minor. Now, what kind of chords, so major or minor, do we have now when we're thinking this in A minor? Then we would have the 1, A minor, going to the flat 6, which would be F major, and to the G, which would be G major, going back to A minor. Now what I do in the solo is I play a little bit with those chord tones that are missing in the backing track and the stuff that the rhythm guitar is playing. I can play with it because no other instrument is telling me to, hey, you know what? You should better play the major 3rd or the minor 3rd or whatnot. We don't have any keys there or any kind of other instrument that are playing this specific 3rd which makes a chord minor or major. So me as a soloist, I can decide for myself if I could use major or minor, and therefore I can create some really cool and interesting melodies with those chord tones. This is a way how to sound exotic without using some fancy exotic scales with some over-the-used and annoying names, to be honest, because we are taking a really cool kind of color and putting it inside this pretty common chord progression. But what was I doing? Well, in the solo, I basically said, alright, you know what? I don't play A minor in the beginning, I play A major, making all three chords major chords. So we have A major, F major, G major, A major. This is a chord progression, by the way, that some friends of mine are referring this to the EOS chord progression, because we used to play in a band called EOS, and we really have this chord progression in every song. Every chorus or every epic kind of thing of this band, or all the songs that we wrote, had this kind of chord progression in it. So I'm referring this one often as the EOS chord progression. Check it out if you are a fan of progressive metal. Band sadly doesn't exist anymore. So going back to the chord notes, now I can play some really cool and interesting melodies that comes out of the movement between those chord notes. For example, I start the solo with the major third of A, the C sharp. Again, I'm referring this to A. The original key is B flat, but down tube one full step, so basically A flat. And I will go now to the minor third, resolving one half step below, which is the fifth of the F. So I have A with the major third, going to F with the fifth. And a good thing about chord melody is that they are close. And the closer some melodies are, the easier it is to get for our ear. When we're jumping between high intervals, this can be really stressful and have a lot of tension. Tension will be an important thing in one of the tips later on, but here I will start the solo with cool sounds, but not much tension in it. So I try to avoid high intervals or high jumps between two notes. So I have this pretty cool melody. Because after the fifth of the F, the C, I go down another half step below, which is now the major third of G, and then resolving back to A. So I have this pretty cool chromatic line. C sharp, C, B, A. Again, C sharp, C, B, A, which is pretty cool. And therefore I always recommend check out the chord notes, check out what you can do with the chord notes, check out what kind of freedom or boundaries you have. So what are the other instruments playing? Are they limiting you to a certain amount of sound, a certain kind of sound? Then I would recommend to go with the sound, because then it's the synergy of band and solo guitar. Or do we have a little bit more freedom like I have here? And with that we also can break a lot out of this kind of just thinking in scales playing. I highly recommend everybody think in intervals. Scales is a pretty awesome thing. Scales have the purpose and it's really awesome. But thinking in intervals, you have a little bit more freedom of what you can do over a certain chord progression. Intervals for me are the Lego bricks of music. Everything is built up out of intervals. Dorian is the minor scale with the interval of the major 6. Some crazy pentatonics with some crazy Asian names on it is just simply pentatonic with, let's say, the flat 5 and the second in it. So you can break down a lot of stuff in our music theory into intervals, and it's a lot easier to define and to organize some things on the fretboard and in your theoretical knowledge as well. So this is something that I recommend all the time. Check out your intervals, learn your intervals. If you want to know more about this method, I made a video, an Italian video about this kind of idea. A long time ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, I will put an info card around here somewhere where you can put on the video and then check out a little bit more kind of this things about playing thirds over certain chords. My tip number 2 is use phrasing and learn from the blues. I've made a video 2 years ago, in the beginning of 2020 I think, about what is the secret of Guthrie Govan. And in fact, I mostly think the secret of Guthrie Govan, or what I'm explaining there, is that he knows the blues. In blues, we, as I've said, play a lot of kind of chord melody, and we're thinking a lot more in intervals than in usually metal soloing, where we tend to overthink a little bit in scales. But another really important aspect is that we usually play melodies, and therefore we are doing a lot more with the parameter called phrasing. And what I did in the solo as well is something that I advise everybody that comes to me in my lessons or stuff like that, is you can put so much life into your melody by just thinking about really interesting way to phrase those melodies. Phrasing. I've learned this a lot by a great German guitar player called Markus Demel. He made a really awesome DVD back in the day about this, putting life into your melodies. And for example, in this solo, I have the melody that I've mentioned in the beginning. But I don't play it like that, which is kind of boring. I tried to, fresh it up with a little bit phrasing. And what I did here is I make a pre-bend and bend into the first note, resolving to the C. Then I do a little bit of tapping, resolving to the A. So a lot of stuff is going on there with this phrasing kind of side to make it a little bit more interesting. The melody is interesting itself, but you need that little icing on the cake to put a little bit more life in it and to make it a little bit more interesting. And therefore I choose this kind of way to play with bendings, with tapping, with harmonics, with vibrato, checking out different kinds and styles of vibrato. I once did a video again about the vibrato of Yngwie Malmsteen, where I explained a little bit my approach on vibrato and how you can create certain different kinds of vibrato with some few pretty cool and interesting tips. Think about what you can do out of the melody with those kind of phrasing techniques, like bending, vibrato, and slides and dynamic stuff and whatnot. Play with your fingers instead with the pick, and I don't know. There's a pretty cool song by my good friend Martin Miller. I'm not sure what the name of the song is right now, but it goes something like this when I remember correctly. Yeah, something like that. And once he explained to me what cool stuff you can do out of this kind of melody by just playing it with the fingers, or playing it with pull-offs, or playing it with picking and stuff like that. Pretty awesome. Check it out. And if you don't know Martin Miller, shame upon you. Awesome guitar player. Really worth to check out. This was tip number 2. Use your phrasing, know the blues. There's a lot of phrasing inside of the blues, so check out blues. It's so important for us guitar players. Even when it sometimes can be boomer bending, it is so important for us guitar players. I can highly recommend to you to play the blues. Alright, let's check out tip number 3. Be aware of the build-up from the solo. When I've studied jazz guitar and jazz composition, I came across a method where you, before you're writing a solo, you write kind of a chart, and then you're doing some sort of diagram into this chart and thinking about how you could build up that solo before you even wrote any note. Then just say, okay, I want to start with a big explosion with some fancy speed picking stuff, and then going a little bit slower, and then doing a little bit kind of melody a little bit more softly, and then I'm increasing it to the big finale, stuff like that. Be aware of the build-up. The build-up is really important, because I think a solo is kind of a song itself inside of a song. When we approach songwriting really with great awareness on how we can build up a song and how we can make a finale and a peak, a tension peak and stuff like that, why not doing this on the solo section as well? So instead of just playing scales and thinking of this lick and that lick, try to, for example, play licks that lead somewhere. That is a way to express your big bang or the way to the big bang, to the big finale. So it's nothing more unsatisfying when somebody is playing a really, really cool and awesome line and then it leads to nowhere. Coitus interruptus. Oh man, it's and there are some players out there which I love from the way how they compose music and develop techniques. But they are always doing this in their solos. Tosin Abasi. No, just kidding. I love the way how Tosin Abasi is writing songs in Elements as leader, but this is the main critique I have in his solos. He has some pretty cool lines in there and then it leads to nowhere. And it's so... For example, here in that solo, I played in the end with some sweep arpeggios, and then after the sweep arpeggios, I'm going into a scale run, which leads to the next section. And therefore, we have this kind of big high peak of energy and of tension with the sweep arpeggios. And then the descending run after it leads it to the next section. So I had something in my mind like a race car, which is really, really fast, and then it makes like not really brakes entirely, but it roll. What is the term of it? The English term? It rolls out a little bit. I don't know right now, but I think you get what I mean. And as well, in that solo, I don't want it to overplay everything in the beginning and just want to play lick after lick after lick after lick. I wanted to start with a melody that was catchy and stay in your ear like I did with the melody. So, and this is something that I really recommend to every guitar player out there. Be aware of the build-up from your solo. Not just start and finish somewhere. Try to see the whole thing as like a song, and try to see are there some parts that are repeating, are they building somewhere in, are they building up to something, is there an enclosure, and stuff like that. So for me, for example, it's really hard to make a good solo over a small passage, like only 8 bars or something like that, because the smaller the time you have where you can play a solo on it, the harder it is to create a build-up. And to really, make decisions like, okay, here I'm making a run that leads to that way, and here I can build up the melody and stuff like that. You don't have that much time in this kind of really short space, like only 8 bars or something like that. Yeah, alright, so much for tip number 3. Let's move on to tip number 4. And tip number 4 is combine techniques. Like on the tip number 2, where I was recommending to combine phrasing kind of techniques, I really want to encourage everybody to combine also technical or techniques that it's important for us shred guitar players. Let's take it to that point. So try to be aware of the different sound that the line has when you are speed picking it, or when you're playing it legato, or when you are playing it with economy picking, or when you have a sweep picking section. And try to combine all kinds of techniques, not do a passage of 8 bars sweeping, which can be good in some certain ways to build up tension, and I like to do that as well. And well, we are guilty as well, because we have in Eternity's End a few minutes later of that solo we have a section where we only play sweep picking, but it's the section itself which allows us to, okay, here's sweeping time. In the solo, I would say you can be a little bit more creative with those kind of techniques and the sound that comes out of techniques. Sometimes, of course, we also need techniques to play a certain line to express ourselves. In a different song from Eternity's End, for example, Hounds of Tindalos, which is also our single, I have a line that I have to play with swibert picking. Now, I'm really not good at swibert picking. The technique is really new for me, and I'm kind of exploring it right now a little bit more and more and more. But I need to do it that way, because otherwise it wasn't possible to play that line, that melodic idea in that high tempo, and I wanted to play that in high tempo. Alright, this was tip number 4. Now let's move on to tip number 5. And tip number 5 is use motifs and rhythmical ideas. And this is something that I have learned years ago when I was studying jazz guitar, and there was a time where I don't have lessons by a guitar player, by a guitar teacher. There was a time where I had lessons by my good friend Sasha, which was a bass teacher and a bass player, a really awesome bass player. And he really showed me how to work on motifs and on rhythmical ideas and how to develop them and how to give those ideas space and allowing to repeat ideas inside of a solo. And I did this, for example, here on that solo, in the second time playing the chord progression. I again was thinking the A major to the F major, G major. I had this kind of arpeggio idea here. And so on. Sorry, I'm not really warmed up and I'm not really able to play fast right now. I was hitting the gym 2 days ago and this was kind of a mistake, doing a lot of weights after a 2-month break, because my arms right now is my fingers won't move fast, and I actually wanted to do a video about fast technique. I thought, okay, what can I do? Okay, 5 tips about spicing up your solo. So sorry if I'm not playing too much in this video, and when, then it sounds a little bit sloppy. But this kind of arpeggio, for example, has a rhythmical motif inside of it. And I'm giving the time to repeat this phrase, to stuck it in your ear and to build up a motif. And therefore, it's easier for us listeners to remember a solo when we can recognize some certain motifs. And it also is a really great way to build up tension, because when we're repeating a motif, and we are not really resolving it, this is a really great way to build up tension. There's a really awesome solo by Pat Martino where he is playing Sunny. I'm not really sure what he was playing 100%. I transcribed this solo long time ago, before I was studying jazz. But there he played like 2 or 3 or 4 choruses of Sunny, I don't know, the same phrase over and over and over and over and over and over. And he's not resolving, and the crowd is flipping out. They are cheering and everybody is celebrating this kind of tension, and they're thinking when he's going to resolve it, and then he resolved it in a pretty cool way, which is something that is really important as well. When you build up tension, know how to resolve the tension. There's nothing more unsatisfying when you build up tension, and like with the cool and big phrases and the big speedy licks, and it leads to nowhere. It's the same thing when you kind of build up tension. And here I resolve the tension after going to the A major, here going to the F major, which is a pretty close way to resolve from the A major, because I don't have, as I've said in the beginning, I don't have too much intervallic jumps between notes. So this is a pretty good way to resolve after you build up tension. So take a time to repeat some phrases and allow them to repeat itself. You don't have to battle yourself thinking, oh man, I only have so much time in my solo, I need to put in that lick and this lick and that shred lick and here this, I don't know, lick, and yeah. Take an idea, and when you like that idea and you think, oh, it would fit pretty well to repeat it, well, then do it. There's nothing against it. So much for that. Those were 5 tips of mine, how you can spice up your solo. Again, as I've said in the beginning, there's so much more, of course, how you can spice up your solos. But I really like to keep all those 5 things in mind when I'm writing a solo. And yeah, I hope you liked this little video. Sorry for not playing too much in the video again. My hand is a little bit tired and exhausted after hitting the gym. I hope I'm going to see you in my next video again. Feel free to subscribe, to leave a comment and hit the like button. And cheers, stay progress. Till then, bye.